Yeah, I started off selling eggs when I was quite young, but like a lot of kids would do that, especially on a family farm. They'd have 5 or 6 hens, maybe 10, and they just sell them to neighbours or family and friends. And I did that. We did it for a while, and maybe at one stage we had 30 or 40 hens. And then, so we got hens once or twice, and I wasn't overly happy with them. So went looking, and we got a few day-old chicks, and we reared them. But the problem was when I was buying them, I had to get 100 of them at the time, and which was way too much for my small flock that I had in the cow house and the farm. So I kept 50. I took 50 to the local market to sell them, which would be Kilmallock for us, on the bank holiday Monday. And we sold them and it went very, very well. And when you're 10 or 11 years of age and you sell 50 hens and you get 500 euro, you think that it's massive money. So I was very excited and thought I could do it again. So the next time we got another 100 chicks and I sold them again. And I thought that it was better than selling the eggs because it was a bit, so the money was slightly bigger and it felt a lot more exciting. And did that in a month, maybe 4 or 5 times, and got a few extra chicks every time. And don't really know how it progressed so quickly after that. We had a few issues with suppliers and did a lot of looking and rang anyone we could find in Ireland or anyone we could find in the UK, and eventually after maybe a couple of 100 phone calls and emails and 6 or 8 months of trying, and because I was so young, I had all the time in the world, and eventually we stumbled upon a hatchery in Europe that we built up a great relationship with. At the time I would have been quite young, but the hatchery didn't know how age I was, and we've been dealing with them then since for the last 5 or 6 years, and we've grown and grown and grown with them. When I started off selling the hens, we were doing markets, which would have been the local market, which was on bank holiday Monday. And then as we got more chickens, we were looking for more ways to sell them. So there's poultry markets that used to be on Sundays. And like there was one in Portlaoise, there was one in Carlow, there was one in Roscommon. So we used to do those on Sundays, and they'd be on the first Sunday of every month, the second Sunday of every month. And I suppose as we grew that way, that's where the issue with suppliers came from. Competition, that's just what competition is. And so when some of them would be going to the sales a lot longer than we were. So they'd know the owner, they'd know who was involved, and they had a bit more power than we had. So that's kind of where the online selling came out of. I said, this isn't working. As you go to a show and you wouldn't be allowed in a 3-hour drive. And because I was so young, I couldn't drive, I had to get a driver, and it was just a lot of hassle. So every day you went out, you had expense and you had to find some way of making money that day. So we started advertising the hens online. So instead of being at the market for the day, we'd do these pickup points. So for example, we'd be in Ennis at 8 o'clock in the morning, we'd be in Gart at 9 o'clock, we'd be in Athenry at 10 o'clock. And we did that on a small scale. We did maybe one short route, all within 2 or 3 hours of home. And we used to do one every Saturday. So I was lucky enough that the neighbour was willing to drive, and they do the route every Saturday. And then to progress from there, there was a huge demand, and people really liked the fact that they could see where the hens were coming from. It was online, the story was there, and they could see when they turned up, they got the hens they wanted, and they knew before they went what they were going to collect. Like, we have 16 different breeds of hens we sell to the public for their backyard, on all small backyard flocks. And we have maybe 10 or 11 varieties of the normal brown egg that you'd see all over the place in every shop. So we have your normal Rhode Island red, and then we have 10 or 11 other brown egg layers, and all our hens are hybrids, so they're all bred to be as productive and as efficient as they can be. And then we've selected breeds that are quiet, so they suit people in their backyard, that they're tame and kids can pet them. And then we've 3 white egg breeds, and we've 2 breeds that lay green eggs, so an olivey greeny tinge on them. And we also, for this year, we have a new hen. It's a hybrid hen that lays a real dark mahogany chocolate brown eggshell. Yeah, so we started selling equipment maybe 2 years after we started selling to a few chickens. So just when we were going to the markets, before we started doing the deliveries, when you're selling the hens, people would say, we ought to get a feeder, we ought to get a drinker. And just from that then we decided that we get a few feeders, drinkers from a wholesaler, and we got a few vitamins as well. And from there then, like, there was a huge demand for equipment, especially when we went online. And since then we've grown that we buy all the stock directly off the factories. In the last 12 months we've taken on a lot of pet shops and agri stores that now buy the products off us. And because the backyard poultry market in Ireland as a whole would be quite large, but for every small pet store and agri store in the country, they wouldn't stock an awful lot of it. So because of the business we do, we can buy in the containers from the factories and then send it out to all the small shops. Yeah, it's gotten very busy, especially in the last 24 months since we finished up school. Like, we've grown and grown where, like, most mornings you're up early loading the vans. So, and because we deliver live chickens. We can't catch them until before the van goes. So if a van is leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're up at 2 o'clock catching the hens to have them in the van, to have the van ready. And obviously, you know, we want the hens in the van for as little time as possible. So like, normally they're not in the van for any more than 4 or 5 hours. When we started off, we couldn't get anybody to take the parcels off us. Like I remember on Dundee, there was a lad selling, you could buy the labels off him, email him what address you wanted them sent to, and buy the label and he would send them out the fast way for you. Whereas now, your couriers come knocking on your door offering you keener rates every year to try and beat who you're working with. Bird flu is definitely a big threat. And we have a lot of other poultry diseases too that are there. So avian flu definitely gets the most notoriety in the media, but there is more out there. So being on top of your biosecurity is by far the most important thing. COVID helped a lot with that. Everybody understands how disease is spread, how virus is spread, and why you have to do the measures that you do. So like now at the end of the day, all you can do is your best. So you have your disinfection points inside the door, you change your suits and boots before you go into the shed. You're very careful, obviously. When we wash the vans every evening. Before we go on site, we disinfect the van. And when we come off site, we'll wash the van, disinfect it again on the way home. Any birds go out for delivery, never go back into the big house of hens. They're always just kept aside, and we don't put them back into the main shed again. Very important now to keep your crates washed, your vans washed, and just limit visitors. And thankfully enough, like for the last 3 or 4 years, because there's been so much going on, and avian flu is a big threat all the time, not just when the housing orders are put in place. And because avian flu spreads through the whole flock and it can spread through the area, we have to be extremely careful because hens are our livelihood, so we have to mind them.